Are you ready to dive into the heart-pounding showdown that transformed the quiet town of Greenhaven into the center of a ruthless power struggle? This story pulls back the curtain on a hidden network of mercenaries and a formidable biker gang, all battling against a seemingly ordinary farmer named Sam Rogers, who's got more grit and skill than anyone could have guessed. From tense standoffs at illegal checkpoints to a final explosive raid on a heavily armed stronghold, each moment unfolds with unpredictable twists. If you're intrigued by undercover ops, small-town bravery, and unexpected heroes standing tall against corruption, then you're in for a thrill. Join us on this journey to discover how one man's unyielding courage can spark hope and freedom for an entire community. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll stay updated on new stories packed with action, suspense, and the power of ordinary folks who dare to make a difference. Buckle up. This is a tale you won't soon forget. Sam Rogers never imagined that an otherwise ordinary morning at Greenhaven Farmers Market would evolve into the biggest unraveling of a weapons trafficking operation in recent history. In this rural corner of the country, days typically began with the smell of fresh produce, the warm greetings of neighbors, and the subdued rhythm of a small-town routine. For years, Sam had cultivated the image of a simple farmer, a large, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s who toted crates of tomatoes and cucumbers around in a battered pickup truck. His kind smile and measured steps made him a friendly fixture, someone who would help an elderly neighbor carry groceries or stop to chat about the weather. Yet under those frayed overalls and a gentle demeanor lay a past both lethal and clandestine, a past he had worked tirelessly to keep buried. After dedicating years of service in elite military operations, Sam had hoped for the tranquility of a new life. He never intended to draw attention to himself, nor did he have any illusions of grandeur. He had simply wanted a quiet place to grow vegetables and maybe pass on some of those skills to younger folks in Greenhaven. His body had thickened over the years. Some described him as big or heavy-set. But it was less an intentional disguise and more the result of stepping away from intense physical regimens. Despite his size, Sam moved with a subtle grace that only a few ever noticed. Most people saw just an amiable farmer who, if anything, resembled a friendly bear, large, warm, and approachable. That morning, though, the calm of Greenhaven's market was disrupted by the rumble of motorcycle engines. 5 members of a group known as the Feral Wolves arrived with a swagger that signaled that they were looking for more than just onions and potatoes. Sam, unloading crates of vibrant bell peppers, spotted them immediately. Drake, the lean and cocky ringleader, strode forward like he owned the place, while a wiry scout named Raven scanned the area. Beside them loomed a colossal figure called Titan, almost Sam's size, and trailing behind were 2 younger recruits who seemed eager to prove themselves. Their leather vests bore the snarling emblem of a wolf, a symbol that had been increasingly spotted around the edges of Greenhaven. Rumors hinted at the Feral Wolves' involvement in petty crimes, but there had also been ominous whispers about something much bigger: gun running, smuggling, and connections to shadowy financiers. As Sam continued setting out his produce, bunches of kale and spinach, baskets of apples, he kept his eyes on the Feral Wolves. His old instincts flared, that heightened awareness cultivated in deserts and jungles far from here. He noted the positions of each biker, the firearms partially concealed under their jackets, and the possible exit routes. For 8 years, he had tried to quell such instincts, convincing himself that his life as a commando was a closed chapter. Now, with the echo of motorcycle engines, everything roared back to life like a second heartbeat. While most market-goers glanced uneasily at the bikers, Sam felt a tightening in his chest, a subtle shift in posture. Harriet Whitfield, a kindly neighbor who sold lavender, waved to him from across her booth, seemingly oblivious to any immediate threat. As Sam waved back, he sensed that this was only the beginning of a larger confrontation. He could almost taste the tension in the air. The unspoken question was how far the Feral Wolves would push, and whether they had any inkling of who they were dealing with. One look at Sam might tell them he was big, but they wouldn't guess he once led missions so classified that even certain government agencies barely knew of their existence. With a final glance at his neatly arranged vegetables, Sam steeled himself. If the Feral Wolves were truly connected to the rumors swirling around Greenhaven, This wasn't just about a few tough bikers swaggering through a market. It was the first ripple in a tide that could engulf the whole town, maybe even the entire region. Sam braced for the inevitable, revealing pieces of himself he had hoped never to show again. The Greenhaven Farmers Market typically blossomed into a colorful tableau each morning, with stalls brimming with fresh lettuces, tomatoes, peaches, and sunflowers. A soundtrack of casual chatter, laughter, and the rustle of plastic bags usually accompanied the event. Today, however, the scene felt strangely muted. Sam Rogers, after carefully placing crates of heirloom tomatoes on his table, looked around and saw that the usual gaiety had been overshadowed by the roaring arrival of the feral wolves. Despite the heavy sense of foreboding, he forced a polite smile when Harriet Whitfield ambled over to inspect his produce. "Your tomatoes look just like your grandfather's used to," she remarked, tapping one gently as though testing its ripeness. Harriet was old enough to recall Sam's childhood, though not his clandestine adult years. Her weathered hands once helped him learn how to plant seeds in neat rows, back when he was only 7 or 8. In those simpler days, the biggest issue was whether the tomatoes would catch too much sun or too little water. Sam appreciated her supportive presence. "Same seeds he used," he replied, letting the warmth in his voice mask his vigilant watch on the bikers. "I'm just trying to keep tradition alive." Beneath this casual exchange, his senses were anything but relaxed. He noted the tension in the air as other vendors eyed the feral wolves with growing worry. 5 motorcycles, each bearing the snarling wolf emblem, lined up near the market's entrance, partially blocking foot traffic. That's when Drake, the group's apparent leader, swaggered forward. Under the morning sun, his face was half concealed by a pair of dark sunglasses, and a faint smirk curled his lips. Sam sized him up, scrawny but wiry, likely agile and temperamental. Raven, with a slender build and sharp features, hung back a few paces, constantly scanning her surroundings. Titan, a wall of muscle, tested the market's sense of space by his mere presence. The 2 recruits, too new for Sam to recognize, hovered nervously. "What do you grow here, big fella?" Drake drawled, his voice cutting through the uneasy hush that had descended on the market. He eyed Sam's formidable frame, a flicker of challenge dancing in his smirk. Sam set down the tomato he was holding, meeting Drake's gaze without flinching. "Vegetables, mostly," he replied in a measured tone. "Greens, tomatoes, peppers, whatever grows well in this soil." "Don't look like you eat many vegetables yourself," Drake snickered, glancing at Sam's large physique. The jibe drew a few uneasy chuckles from the recruits, but Sam only shrugged. "Got a sweet tooth," he said flatly, leaving no room for an easy target. A brief standoff of silence followed, broken only by the rustle of Harriet's lavender bundles as she quickly retreated to her booth. The tension in the air thickened. Sam sensed other people inching away, giving the bikers a wide berth. He suspected Drake came here to provoke or to send a message. The question was, to whom and why? Suddenly, the distant wail of a siren cut through the tense quiet. Sheriff Everett Clark's patrol car turned onto the market street, weaving around a few parked trucks before easing to a stop not far from where Drake stood. In an almost choreographed moment, Drake's posture relaxed, and he tipped his head back as though annoyed at the interruption. Sam could see the flicker of frustration on Drake's face. Clearly, he hadn't planned on law enforcement intervening this soon. Sheriff Clark emerged, a tall man with a lined face that had seen its share of small-town dramas. He removed his sunglasses, eyeing the feral wolves before nodding to Sam. "Everything all right here?" he asked, tone neutral, but edged with authority. Sam nodded slowly. "Just selling produce, Sheriff." Drake and his crew stepped back a bit, likely calculating that a direct confrontation under the watchful eyes of the sheriff wouldn't be wise. Nevertheless, Sam recognized the volatile nature of the situation. In his old life, it was precisely these small confrontations that could escalate into something far more violent, if not carefully managed. For now, the sheriff's arrival dispersed the immediate threat, but Sam knew this was only a temporary lull. He watched as the feral wolves casually milled about for a few more minutes before remounting their bikes and riding away in a cloud of exhaust. Harriet returned to Sam's stall, visibly shaken, yet relieved. "They'll be back," she whispered. Sam silently agreed. Whatever the feral wolves' real intentions were, they had staked out the market, tested local law enforcement's response, and gauged Sam's willingness to stand his ground. As the morning wore on, customers approached Sam with hushed thanks, some praising his calm demeanor. He smiled politely, though inside his military-honed instincts were already sounding alarms. The confrontation might have ended peacefully, but the undercurrent of menace remained. In quieter times, Sam would have brushed it off as an isolated incident. But given the encrypted messages he had received over the past weeks, hints that someone with serious backing was moving weapons through the region, he doubted the feral wolves were just petty bullies. The suspicion grew in the back of his mind. This might be the opening gambit of a far bigger game. As the sun climbed higher, the tension that permeated Greenhaven Farmers Market slowly eased, but never fully dissipated. Vendors swapped nervous glances, their conversations peppered with references to the feral wolves' intrusion. Sam Rogers, having packed up the bulk of his produce, took a moment to rest at a makeshift coffee stall. The sweet aroma of freshly brewed beans would have felt comforting on any other day, but the current circumstances left him in a state of constant vigilance. Sheriff Clark also stopped by for coffee, nodding a greeting to Sam. Though the sheriff maintained a public facade of calm, Sam could sense the tension in his posture. Small-town police forces weren't usually equipped to handle heavily armed biker gangs, especially ones rumored to be tied to larger criminal networks. "Not often we see them roll in like this," Clark muttered, sipping from a styrofoam cup. "I've heard stories, but they've always operated more in the shadows." Sam sighed. "They were too open today, as if they wanted folks to see them, almost like they were announcing something." Clark nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I received an anonymous tip early this morning, telling me I should come by the market at a specific time. Strange, right? Didn't say who they were, just that I should keep an eye out for trouble." Sam's jaw tightened slightly. He recalled the coded text on his own phone, sent by someone within federal intelligence, warning him that activity might surface soon. He had hoped it was just an overblown rumor, but the feral wolves' arrival seemed to confirm that the tipster was correct. He glanced around, noticing a man in a jacket reading a newspaper from a lonely bench. Their eyes met briefly, and Sam recognized him. Nate Parker, an undercover federal agent assigned to watch Sam's back. "I guess someone wanted to make sure the town wasn't caught completely off guard," Sam said evenly, turning back to Clark. "Good timing in any case." Before Clark could press further, Parker stood up, folded the newspaper, and walked casually over to them. He greeted the sheriff, then addressed Sam with a neutral smile, the kind that conveyed more than it revealed. "Morning, Sam. Sheriff?" Sam introduced Parker as a friend visiting from out of state, a plausible cover. Clark responded politely but remained curious, sizing up this newcomer with professional caution. Even in a small town, you didn't just wander into the farmer's market during a biker incursion without reason. Parker launched into small talk. How pretty the farmland was this season, how good the local peaches tasted, and how interesting it was to watch a community band together. In between each benign statement, Sam caught Parker's subtle glances, silently asking if he was okay. Sam gave brief nods in return, acknowledging that he was holding up, but also aware that the situation was far from resolved. As they chatted, Harriet and a couple of other vendors tidied their stalls, shooting nervous looks in Sam's direction. Sheriff Clark, finishing his coffee, eventually excused himself to respond to a radio call, leaving Sam and Parker alone amid the thinning crowd. Parker murmured, "We've been monitoring the feral wolves for a while, Sam. They're definitely tied to bigger fish, maybe even a large-scale trafficking pipeline. Don't let today's show of bravado fool you. They're testing you, seeing if the rumors about a certain farmer with a mysterious background are true." Sam exhaled slowly, a flicker of frustration tightening his features. "I hope to stay under the radar, Parker, but if they keep pushing, I might have no choice." Parker nodded in understanding. "You have backup, though," he offered quietly. "Just don't do anything to blow your cover too soon. We need hard evidence before we can take them down." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Sam. Part of him wanted to confront Drake and his crew head-on, to stop them from intimidating his friends and neighbors. But he also grasped the bigger stakes. If the feral wolves were truly a front for a more extensive criminal network, any move he made could jeopardize the entire investigation. For now, he'd have to balance the role of a small-town farmer with the duty of a former elite operative. And in that tension, Sam felt the echo of battles he thought he had left behind for good. Throughout the afternoon, the atmosphere at Greenhaven Farmers Market gradually returned to a semblance of normal. Regular customers who hadn't witnessed the earlier confrontation arrived in search of fresh produce, homemade jams, and the usual pleasantries exchanged in small-town life. Yet there was a collective sense that something had shifted, as if the market had lost a layer of its idyllic charm. Sam Rogers stayed until the last of his vegetables were sold, managing only a few hours of calm conversation with the occasional inquisitive neighbor. Some asked if he was okay. Others simply offered a polite nod, aware that the feral wolf's presence had rattled everyone's nerves. By late afternoon, Sam decided it was time to pack up and head home. Harriet bade him farewell, her eyes reflecting lingering anxiety. Driving away in his old pickup, Sam replayed the morning's events. The feral wolves hadn't come just to buy vegetables or cause random mischief. They had deliberately chosen a public place to flex their muscle. Sam suspected they aimed to see how quickly local law enforcement would respond and how certain individuals, possibly including Sam himself, would react. It was a test, or perhaps a preview of bigger actions to come. He drove through the winding roads leading to his farm, the countryside bathed in golden evening light. Rolling hills, fenced pastures, and neat rows of cornfields passed by his window. For a few moments, he let himself enjoy the simple pleasure of rural tranquility, but he knew it wouldn't last. Once at the farm, a modest, older property with a barn he'd painstakingly restored, Sam parked by the main house and stepped out. The familiar scent of hay and earth drifted on the breeze, momentarily calming his nerves. Before he even reached the porch, his encrypted phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, he saw a coded message from Parker. "Activity near your perimeter tonight. Stay alert." Sam took a measured breath. The feral wolves, or whoever backed them, were wasting no time. With practiced efficiency, he entered his home, locked the doors, and moved to a concealed panel near the back wall. Pressing a hidden latch, he revealed a small, sophisticated surveillance station. Though he had traded camouflage fatigues for overalls, Sam had kept certain tools from his old life, tools that now seemed more necessary than ever. The screens flickered to life, displaying feeds from strategically placed cameras around the property. With only a few glances, Sam spotted an unfamiliar black SUV parked just beyond the tree line. Its headlights were off, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Someone was watching him. He tapped a few keys to adjust the infrared settings, confirming two figures moving around the vehicle. Their postures hinted at impatience or cautious anticipation, possibly waiting for nightfall to make a move. Sam's stomach tightened. The day had escalated quickly, and now it seemed like these watchers weren't content to let him rest. He placed his hand on a hidden compartment that held a small arsenal, a service sidearm, a rifle, and some specialized equipment. Years ago, using this gear felt as natural as breathing. Now he hesitated, wishing that his quiet life of farming hadn't been interrupted. Still, he couldn't ignore the reality unfolding outside. Taking a slow breath, Sam decided to keep observation for now. Engaging too soon would betray his awareness and potentially tip them off. The key was to collect evidence. If the feral wolves were part of a larger pipeline, there had to be communications, shipments, or other proof of their conspiracy. Jumping out guns blazing would accomplish nothing except exposing Sam's identity as more than a gentle farmer. Night descended on Greenhaven, and with it, a deep hush enveloped the farm. Sam watched as the SUV's occupants made no overt move, content to bide their time. His mind churned with strategic considerations. Should he deploy extra floodlights to make them uncomfortable, or remain hidden in the darkness? In distant memories, he recalled the adage that sometimes the best tactic was patience, to let the enemy reveal themselves. For now, that would have to be his approach. He took one last look at the silent fields through the monitors, then dimmed the lights. Standing in the shadows of his own living room, Sam thought about Harriet, Sheriff Clark, Parker, and everyone else who might be in danger if the feral wolves escalated further. He exhaled slowly, steeling himself. The lines were being drawn, and whether he liked it or not, Sam's days of quiet anonymity were over. In the soft glow of a single table lamp, Sam Rogers found himself poring over old service files and notes he'd kept from his military days. He'd always been careful, never letting his past intrude on his new life unless absolutely necessary. But the events of the day compelled him to take stock of what he might need. Outside, the security cameras displayed an eerily calm scene. The black SUV remained, as though its occupants had settled in for a long vigil. Sam recalled the coded tips that had trickled in over recent weeks, each indicating that a significant criminal enterprise was shifting its focus to Greenhaven. The feral wolves were almost certainly the local arm of that enterprise, tasked with establishing control or softening the ground for something larger. A network of arms dealing, perhaps, or a route for smuggling. The cryptic references to major shipments and VIP backers had alarmed him enough to reconnect with certain federal contacts, culminating in the arrival of Agent Nate Parker. Tonight, though, Sam was on his own. Parker and his small team of operatives were stretched thin, monitoring other suspected nodes of activity around the county. While Sam didn't regret involving them, he couldn't handle the entire threat alone. He acknowledged the risk that came with shining a federal spotlight on Greenhaven. The criminals might accelerate their plans if they felt cornered. Slipping into a side room, Sam opened a concealed chest. Inside lay a carefully packed array of survival gear, medical supplies, night vision goggles, and a few advanced gadgets he'd retained from specialized missions. He fingered the strap of an old harness, remembering the day he'd last used it on a covert operation. Time had softened the edges of these memories, but not their intensity. He could still picture the desert horizon stretching endlessly, the hum of helicopters, and the coded radio chatter that accompanied life-and-death decisions. With a faint sigh, he left the gear in place, taking only a compact handgun for self-defense. Making a show of heavy armament might provoke a premature escalation. He rechecked the monitors. The silhouettes around the black SUV had shifted slightly, but they remained distant, like wolves circling a sleeping camp. Let them watch, Sam thought. If they wanted to see a harmless farmer, he would play that role, until he couldn't. A beep on his encrypted phone drew his attention. A message from Parker. Intel suggests a possible move against you tonight. Stay low, gather evidence if you can. Reinforcements on standby. Sam allowed himself a small, humorless smile. On standby might mean hours away, depending on the deployment of Parker's limited team. The wheels of official bureaucracy turn slowly, even in crises. Stepping outside for a moment, Sam inhaled the cool night air. The moon was a pale crescent, and the sky's darkness pressed down around his property. Far off, a pair of owls hooted in conversation. It could have been a peaceful night, like so many he'd enjoyed since retiring here, had it not been for the undercurrent of threat. He paced around the porch, scanning the tree line. Nothing stirred beyond the gentle rustle of leaves, yet the knowledge that watchers lurked just out of sight made his skin crawl. Retreating back inside, Sam settled into a chair with a clear line of sight to the yard, the gun resting within easy reach. He reflected briefly on the townspeople who had no idea how close they were to a potential firefight. Harriet blissfully preparing a new batch of lavender sachets, the sheriff probably dozing in front of a late-night TV show, local families asleep with no suspicion that criminal elements prowled so near. Greenhaven was on the precipice of a conflict it had never asked for. Hours slipped by in tense quiet. Midnight came and went. Several times Sam considered switching off the lamp to move around in darkness, but he decided to maintain the illusion of an unwary occupant. If the feral wolves or their associates intended a move, they might do so thinking Sam was an easy target. He'd learned long ago that allowing an enemy to underestimate you was a significant advantage. At last, movement flashed across a surveillance feed. A figure emerged from the SUV, creeping closer to the barn. Sam stiffened, scanning other camera angles to see if this was a coordinated approach. Sure enough, two more figures advanced from a different direction, crouching behind a line of hedges. Sam's heart pounded, adrenaline surging. This was it. He flicked off the lamp, glancing at the phone. No fresh messages from Parker. He was on his own. Everything happened in a swirl of half-seen shapes and whispered commands. Sam Rogers moved through the darkness of his own farmhouse as though it were a battlefield. In many ways it was, just one far from the sandy dunes or mountainous enclaves he once knew. Outside, his security cameras captured the intruders moving into position, each reading like a memory of past night raids he had both led and evaded. And these new arrivals were not simple bikers, Sam noted. Their coordination was too polished. They flanked the barn, scanning the perimeter with small, handheld devices that likely detected motion or heat signatures. Another man crouched near the side window of the house, skillfully avoiding the faint glow from the yard light. Sam's pulse quickened, not in fear, but in the lethal calm that came from years of high-risk operations. He pressed a tiny earpiece to check in with Parker's emergency frequency, but it remained silent. Parker might be tied up, or the infiltration might have jammed local signals. Sam decided to improvise. In the hallway behind a false panel, he retrieved a compact night vision monocular. Slipping it over his eye, he took a position near a window, scanning the yard. The silhouettes were distinct. 4, maybe 5 infiltrators, each carrying small arms. They displayed the composure of veterans, moving with quiet precision. Minutes crawled as they approached the farmhouse. Sam's mind raced through possible scenarios. A forced entry to capture him alive, a sabotage of the property, or a search for something they believed he was hiding. In any case, confrontation seemed inevitable. He inhaled slowly, forcing his nerves to remain steady. If it came to a fight, he had the home field advantage in the element of surprise, so long as he remained unseen. Outside, a soft click reached his ear from a partially open window. Someone was fiddling with a lock. Sam ducked behind the stairwell, flicking off the safety on his handgun. Another memory surfaced. The infiltration training, where they simulated exactly this scenario. He'd been on both ends of such operations, sometimes as the infiltrator, sometimes as the one defending. The irony was not lost on him now. Suddenly, the front door handle jiggled, then turned. A faint beam of a flashlight cut across the living room. Sam held his breath, letting the intruder step inside. The figure advanced cautiously, scanning the space. Sam noticed the quick flick of the man's wrist signals, 2 short pulses of light that likely meant area clear to any watchers outside. Then came the second intruder, hugging the hallway wall, weapon at the ready. Sam could hear soft footsteps near the back entrance as well, suggesting a coordinated assault. They were boxing him in. If he waited too long, he might be surrounded. If he acted too soon, the others might slip away. Deciding to strike a balance, he eased around the corner and caught the second intruder from behind, jamming the muzzle of his handgun into the man's shoulder blade. "Don't move," Sam growled, voice low. The man tensed but made no sound. He was well trained, clearly. Sam disarmed him quickly, tossing the weapon aside, then delivered a swift blow to the base of the skull, knocking him unconscious. The first intruder, sensing something amiss, jerked around. Sam hurled a lamp into his path to distract him, then tackled him in a flurry of limbs. A brief struggle ensued, ending when Sam pinned the man's weapon hand to the floor, forcibly ripping the gun away. Outside, a yell pierced the night. "Code Red! He's in here!" The overhead lights in the yard flickered, possibly from a sabotage device. Sam's cameras briefly went to static, then re-established their feed. He glimpsed at least 2 more men converging on the main entrance. Tying the intruder's hands with plastic zip ties, always useful to keep in a farm shed, Sam dashed upstairs to a vantage point. Through a small window, he saw more movement, headlights flickering in the distance. Was that backup from Parker or reinforcements for the feral wolves? His phone buzzed at last. He read Parker's terse text. "We're close. Hold on." A wave of relief mingled with tension. Sam realized he'd have to stall any further advance until Parker arrived. But these men, whoever they were, had come prepared. They likely had a contingency plan. "Time to push back," Sam muttered, adrenaline flooding his system. With a calculated move, he turned off all the interior lights, plunging the house into darkness. He'd fight on his own terms, in his own home, for as long as it took. If the feral wolves and their backers thought they were just dealing with a fat farmer, they were about to learn the hard way what Sam Rogers was capable of. An explosion of activity shattered the quiet. Shouts echoed from all sides of the farmhouse. Flashlights flickered in rapid arcs, and Sam Rogers could hear the rapid thumping of his own heart. He stationed himself at the top of the staircase, scanning the lower floor with his night vision monocular. Two intruders lay bound, but he counted three more shapes advancing cautiously through the living room. One of them whispered into a radio, "Target is upstairs. Confirm no civvies on site." Another responded with a curt, "Affirmative." Their methodical approach underscored their professional background. This wasn't a ragtag posse from a local gang. It was specialized infiltration, likely paid for by whoever pulled the feral wolf's strings. Sam weighed his options. If he held his position, they might use smoke or tear gas. If he tried to slip out, he risked running into more outside. His best chance was to exploit the element of surprise, keep them uncertain of his moves. With a deep breath, he flicked a switch on the wall, activating a trap he'd engineered months ago for potential trespassers. A set of high-intensity floodlights near the windows, rigged to blind anyone relying on nighttime shadows. The entire downstairs burst into brilliance, forcing the intruders to squint or shield their eyes. Seizing that moment of disorientation, Sam rushed down, disarming the closest assailant with a quick strike to the elbow before kneeing him in the chest. Another intruder whipped around, but Sam managed to dodge the initial swing of a rifle. Grappling ensued, a flurry of feet and fists as Sam fought to keep the muzzle away from him. The scrabble ended when Sam leveraged his weight to slam the man into a wooden support beam, the rifle clattering to the floor. The last intruder proved more adept. Dancing out of Sam's reach, he raised a sidearm, muzzle aimed squarely at Sam's chest. Before he could fire, the front door burst open. A half-dozen men in tactical gear swarmed in, shouting commands. "Freeze! Federal agents!" It was Agent Nate Parker and his team finally arriving. The intruder spun, tried to shoot, but a well-aimed bullet from Parker's colleague knocked the weapon out of his hand. Within seconds, the farmhouse was awash in adrenaline-fueled chaos. Parker's squad systematically secured the perimeter, handcuffing the intruders, some unconscious, others cursing. Sam sagged against the wall, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his brow. Though he'd held his own, he felt the undeniable strain of advanced age and the years spent away from direct combat. "You okay?" Parker asked, stepping over one of the subdued attackers to reach Sam. The agent's eyes scanned Sam for injuries. "Yeah," Sam managed, voice strained. "Few bruises, maybe, but I'll live. Took out 2 or 3 before you guys barged in. There might be more outside." Parker nodded, gesturing for 2 agents to sweep the yard. "We arrived as fast as we could. Jamming signals slowed us. We caught a couple of their backups on the road, too. Seems they had an exit strategy if things went wrong." Glancing over the row of captured intruders, Sam noted how none wore distinct biker garb. "Mercenaries," he said tersely. "Could be ex-military. They had a well-coordinated approach." Parker knelt, inspecting the patches on one man's sleeve. "No standard insignias, of course, but these are high-end gear, probably financed by someone with deep pockets, someone who wants to keep the feral wolves in business." As Parker's team filed the intruders outside for questioning, Sam inhaled deeply, trying to steady his pulse. This was far more than a scuffle with local troublemakers. The men who had invaded his home carried state-of-the-art technology, including comms gear rarely seen outside specialized units. One by one, the subdued attackers were loaded into unmarked vans, heading for a discreet federal holding facility. An uneasy calm settled over the farmhouse. The bullet-scarred walls and overturned furniture told a story of a lethal confrontation narrowly contained. Sam rubbed his sore shoulder, a sobering reminder that the battles he once waged overseas had, in some twisted way, found him again on his own front porch. Through the shattered window, dawn's early light cast a pale glow across the fields, hinting at another day in Greenhaven and a future that looked increasingly uncertain. Parker approached, speaking in a hushed tone. "We'll see what we can extract from them, but I doubt they know the top of the chain. They're likely hired guns, just following orders from a bigger network." Sam gave a weary nod. "I figure so, but at least this confirms how serious they are." The 2 men stood in the battered living room, a reluctant alliance against an enemy still unseen. Sam realized that with every step they took, they were no longer just defending a farm or a small town. They were staring into the depths of a conspiracy that reached beyond Greenhaven's borders. And now that shots had been fired and men captured, neither side could turn back. The night's firefight at Sam Rogers' farm sent ripples through Greenhaven. By morning, word had spread among residents who spotted unmarked vans rolling away under the cover of dawn or heard hushed rumors of gunshots echoing in the countryside. The town's grapevine buzzed with speculation. Some believed Sam had single-handedly fended off a gang invasion. Others suspected a massive drug raid, and a few even spun yarns about secret government experiments. The truth, however, remained in the shadows. Sam watched the sun climb over the pines from his porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. His body ached from the night's ordeal, muscles stiff, bruises blossoming. Agent Parker had left a couple of hours earlier, taking the captured mercenaries to a secure location for questioning. Though the immediate threat at Sam's farm was neutralized, the underlying problem, that someone was financing a network of criminal activity with the feral wolves as the local enforcers, remained. He sighed, remembering the calm life he had once cherished here. The neat rows of vegetables, the quiet hush of farmland, and the friendly waves from neighbors all felt overshadowed by the knowledge that a covert war was unfolding. Even Harriet Whitfield's usually cheerful presence seemed tinged with unease when she drove by, craning her neck to see if Sam was all right. Before he could dwell further, a familiar vehicle crunched up his driveway. Sheriff Everett Clark's patrol car. Clark stepped out, removing his hat as he climbed the porch. "Morning, Sam," he began, gaze lingering on the bullet holes in the front door. "Heard rumors of some commotion last night." Sam nodded. "Had unwelcome visitors. You'll probably hear a lot more rumors before the day's out." Clark glanced around, clearing his throat. "Sam, I'm not going to push too hard, but I need an official statement. And more importantly, I need to know if the town's in danger." The question hung in the air, charged with unspoken tension. Sam set his coffee cup down, motioning for Clark to follow him inside. The living room looked like the aftermath of a brawl, furniture askew, walls bearing the scars of gunfire. Clark's eyes widened. "I'll level with you," Sam said, his tone solemn. "Last night, some very capable individuals tried to get at me, or something they think I have. I managed to hold them off and help arrived in time. But there's a bigger picture here, Sheriff. This isn't just random criminals. It's organized, funded, and dangerous." Clark let out a measured sigh. "I figured as much. We've seen the feral wolves around, and they've always been trouble, but never to this degree. It's like they suddenly have more resources, more confidence." Sam rubbed his temple. "They do, and they're not working alone. I can't give you all the details, but there's federal interest in these folks. Let's just say you'll see more unmarked vehicles in town." The sheriff folded his arms, wrestling with the implications. "So I can't put out a standard APB or swarm them with local deputies. It would probably be too dangerous. That, and we need them to slip up in a way that reveals their top-level backers," Sam explained. "We corner them too hard, they'll either vanish or retaliate with force. And if they're well-connected, they might have allies in unexpected places, maybe even in local government." Clark's frown deepened. Damn, Greenhaven was never meant for something like this. He paused, glancing at Sam's bruised knuckles. "You sure you're up for it?" Sam offered a grim nod. "If I walk away, they'll keep pushing, and it's not just about me. I don't want Harriet or any of our neighbors getting caught in the crossfire." The sheriff gripped Sam's shoulder in a gesture of camaraderie. "I don't either, but be careful. You're not alone, but the line between the good guys and the bad guys can get blurry when big money and big power come into play." Sam exhaled, feeling the weight of Clark's words. He watched as the sheriff departed, leaving behind the understanding that Greenhaven's peaceful facade had cracked. The sun continued its slow climb, illuminating the bullet-riddled front of the farmhouse, as though spotlighting the conflict that lay ahead. Sam realized that from this point on, every step he took would be more dangerous, every move scrutinized by both the feral wolves and their powerful benefactors. There was no turning back. In the days following the ambush at Sam's farm, the tension in Greenhaven escalated with unsettling speed. Local businesses reported unfamiliar faces asking pointed questions about Sam, while townsfolk noticed black SUVs rolling through back roads at odd hours. Even Harriet Whitfield, who tried to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor at the farmer's market, confessed to Sam that a pair of strangers had stopped by her stall, inquiring about his past and how long he'd been living in the area. Agent Nate Parker's team, for their part, maintained a discreet but thorough presence. They set up a hidden command station in an old storage shed near Sam's property line, equipping it with laptops, communication gear, and a rotating watch schedule. Between analyzing intercepted messages and coordinating with other federal offices, Parker seemed perpetually on the brink of exhaustion. Whenever he emerged to speak with Sam, his expression was laced with grim urgency. Late one evening, Sam joined Parker in the makeshift command post. A bank of monitors showed grainy night vision feeds, roads, driveways, the outskirts of a rundown barn rumored to be a feral wolf's hangout. Occasional bursts of radio chatter crackled through the speakers, coded language that Sam recognized from his previous life. Parker rubbed his eyes, stifling a yawn. Storm Rider, Storm Raven, references to a loadout next week, he muttered, scanning the transcripts. They're planning a big operation soon. Sam glanced at the screen, absorbing each cryptic line of text. They're using old CB channels to talk in code, he observed. We did something similar overseas. A pang of nostalgia mingled with the stark reality of his current situation. Exactly, Parker replied. And from the chatter, it sounds like it's more than just local intimidation. Maybe a major shipment of illegal weapons, or a demonstration of strength for potential buyers. The feral wolves are just the local muscle, but the real power is coming from higher up, someone with money and influence. Sam thought about the men who broke into his home. They weren't scruffy bikers, but professionals with ex-military precision. So the feral wolves are hooking up with private contractors, or worse, he said quietly, and our little corner of the world is becoming a showroom for them to prove what they can do. Parker nodded. Which makes you a key target, Sam. If they suspect you're working with us, they'll try to neutralize you, either scare you off or worse. But we also need you close because you've got the skill set to handle yourself and the local trust to keep some of these people from panicking. Sam absorbed Parker's words with a solemn nod. Greenhaven folks are already on edge. You add in a violent crackdown or constant intimidation, and it'll only drive them further into fear. We have to stop this at the source. Leaning back in his chair, Parker studied Sam for a moment. You realize if we do expose the operation, it's not just the feral wolves who'll fall. We might bring down some big names, possibly in government or corporate sectors that have been funding these private armies. It'll be messy. A flicker of determination ignited in Sam's eyes. I served to protect this country, Parker. Didn't matter if the threat was overseas or right here. If we have a chance to rip the roots of this corruption out, I'm in, no matter how high it goes. Silence enveloped the shed for a few beats, broken only by the hum of the monitors. Outside, the evening wind rustled through the pine trees, a forlorn lullaby for a small town on the cusp of chaos. Parker exhaled, finally nodding. All right, we'll keep building the case, but be ready for anything, Sam. They know who you are now, and they won't hesitate to push back with lethal force. Sam stood up, feeling the old soldier in him stir to life. Let them come, he said quietly. Greenhaven isn't a war zone, but if they try to turn it into one, they'll face the fight of their lives. Within another week, Greenhaven's transformation accelerated from a peaceful agricultural community to a town under covert siege. Official-looking notices began appearing on shop windows and farm gates, pending inspection or under review by federal authorities. In reality, many of these were orchestrated by Helena Briggs, a stern woman claiming to be an investigator for the Department of Agriculture. She arrived with a small army of clipboard-toting subordinates, picking through farms for alleged code violations. Even Harriet Whitfield wasn't spared. Briggs' team arrived at her lavender fields, photographing every aspect from soil composition to the layout of her booths at the market. Harriet confided in Sam that the questions seemed invasive, more about personal details and local gossip than anything agricultural. Meanwhile, Sam witnessed these investigators repeatedly asking about him, where he got his seeds, whether he used certain equipment, how often he traveled out of town. It wasn't long before the rumors grew wilder. Some local farmers began to suspect the entire process was a ruse to gather intel under the veneer of federal regulations. Agent Parker confirmed these suspicions, explaining that Helena Briggs was likely working for the same shadowy network behind the feral wolves. Their strategy, Parker said, involved tightening a noose of bureaucracy and intimidation around potential threats. The scrutiny forced Sam to keep a low profile. He carefully updated the ledgers for his produce sales, ensuring nothing looked out of the ordinary. He cooperated politely whenever Briggs's inspectors dropped by, giving them tours of his fields and storing away any sign of advanced surveillance technology. Still, the tension gnawed at him. The watchers were everywhere, and each passing day brought the sense that something bigger was imminent. Late in the afternoon, Sam found himself hosting a tense meeting in his kitchen with Parker, Sheriff Clark, and two other federal agents. The table was covered with documents, maps, and hastily printed photographs. Clark, rubbing his temples, looked more stressed than Sam had ever seen him. Parker tapped a photo of a weathered barn on the outskirts of town. "We've identified this as a potential hub for the feral wolves, somewhere they might be stockpiling weapons or staging for a large-scale event." One of the federal agents, a man named Webb, nodded. "We suspect they've moved in heavy crates under cover of night. Satellite images are inconclusive, but local tips suggest unusual activity. Multiple trucks, guard patrols, and advanced equipment." Sheriff Clark let out a slow, worried breath. If they have that kind of hardware, what's stopping them from taking over the town by force? Parker exchanged a look with Sam. They might not need overt force if Helena Briggs and her bogus federal front can create a pretext for a lockdown. They'll claim it's for public safety or some other excuse, all while positioning armed teams around key areas. Sam clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the scenario pressing in. And folks around here respect authority. They might just comply until it's too late. Then the feral wolves waltz in under the guise of helping to restore order. Everyone in the room recognized the gravity of that possibility. Clark stood, pacing the worn linoleum floor. "We can't wait for them to roll out a full-blown takeover. We need a move, some kind of legal or strategic action that disrupts their plans." Parker nodded, pointing to a binder labeled Operation Ledgerfall, the code name for their slowly building case. "We're close to having enough evidence for an arrest warrant targeting known members of the feral wolves. The problem is the higher-ups. If we strike too soon, we tip them off, and they vanish. If we wait too long, they could fortify positions or incite chaos in Greenhaven." A somber hush followed his words. Sam couldn't shake the thought of Harriet and other elderly neighbors being caught in the crossfire. This wasn't just a theoretical discussion. It was real people's lives on the line. Eventually, Parker turned to Sam, a flicker of determination lighting his eyes. "We have your farm surveillance, we have some intel from captured mercenaries, and we've got local testimonies. But we need a tipping point, something that forces their hand in broad daylight, revealing their real nature before they can spin a narrative." Sam stiffened his spine. "I'll do whatever it takes. You know that." Clark rested a hand on Sam's shoulder. "You've already done more than most, Sam. Just keep in mind, these people aren't ordinary criminals. They have resources that rival some government branches." Sam nodded, heart heavy yet resolute. The meeting ended with a plan to maintain constant vigilance, coordinate with watchers around the suspect barn, and prepare to respond decisively if the feral wolves made a move. As the group dispersed, Sam stood by his window, gazing at the darkening sky. The future of Greenhaven, and perhaps the fate of more places beyond it, balanced on a knife's edge. Every day the tension ratcheted higher. Sooner or later, someone would make the first major move. A crescendo of covert activity rattled Greenhaven over the next several days. Unmarked vehicles prowled rural roads at odd hours. Armed men set up makeshift checkpoints, and the once quiet outskirts became a zone of hushed unease. Those who dared approach found themselves questioned, sometimes rudely, about their business, ostensibly for security reasons. The local rumor mill churned. Some speculated about a terror threat. Others whispered about shady government experiments. Only a few had any inkling of the truth. A powerful private network was methodically seizing control, step by step. Sam Rogers frequently felt torn between frustration and his trained calm. He watched at times helplessly as neighbors grew anxious about these official procedures. Harriet Whitfield confided that whenever she took her lavender to the market, she saw men in black SUVs lurking near the highway. Sheriff Clark seemed powerless to intervene, overshadowed by the presence of Helena Briggs's so-called federal task force in the intimidation of the feral wolves. At the barn-turned command post on Sam's property, Agent Parker worked day and night, coordinating a shrinking staff of federal allies. Each day brought more scraps of intelligence, phone intercepts referencing cryptic deliveries, sightings of suspicious cargo, and reports of newly deployed men in tactical gear. They painted a grim picture. The feral wolves and their backers were preparing for a show of force, something that could cow the entire region if executed effectively. One late evening, Sam joined Parker by a set of monitors that displayed night vision footage of a checkpoint near the old highway leading out of Greenhaven. Several men in dark tactical attire stood guard, joined by Drake and a few bikers. "They're combining local muscle with mercenaries," Parker muttered. "That means money is flowing in, and someone wants results." Sam studied the men's posture. They handled their weapons with the ease of seasoned operators, not the bravado of street-level gangs. They're forming an armed perimeter around town. If they solidify these checkpoints, they'll control all comings and goings. Anyone who tries to resist will be labeled a threat. Parker nodded grimly. "We're seeing the beginning of a paramilitary takeover disguised as emergency measures. And with Helena Briggs orchestrating legal smokescreens, code violations, health mandates, whatever it takes, they'll claim all this is to protect the public from some fabricated crisis." Rubbing his temples, Sam let out a slow breath. Memories of distant war zones flickered in his mind, places where insurgents or private militias used similar tactics. He had never expected to see it unfold on American soil, let alone in his own backyard. "What's our timeline for a federal crackdown?" he asked. "If we don't move soon, they'll be too entrenched." Parker shuffled a handful of papers, scowling. "We're pushing for it, Sam, but red tape is strangling us. Higher-ups want indisputable proof of imminent wrongdoing. They're reluctant to trigger a confrontation that might cause civilian casualties." Anger simmered beneath Sam's collected exterior. "So we just wait for them to lock down the whole county?" "Not exactly," Parker replied, grim determination flashing in his eyes. "We're setting a trap. We need to provoke a clear violation, an undeniable act of aggression. That's when we swoop in with warrants, full federal backing, and possibly even National Guard support if necessary." Sam lowered his gaze to the floor. "Bait, huh? Something or someone they can't resist?" Parker's silence was telling. Yes, Sam was that bait. His altercation with the feral wolves at the market and the raid on his farm had already marked him as a key threat. If Sam made a public stand, say by openly defying one of their checkpoints, he might draw out their true power and expose them in front of hidden cameras. Sighing, Sam looked at the monitors once more. The men at the checkpoint laughed among themselves, oblivious to the watchful eyes. "I'll do it. This is my home. I won't see it twisted into a stronghold for criminals masquerading as authorities." Parker nodded, placing a hand on Sam's shoulder. "We'll back you, Sam, every step. Just be careful. They've shown they're willing to use lethal force. We have no margin for error." The night wore on, the thick hush broken by the hum of electronics in the command post. In the distance, the silhouettes of armed figures continued their silent patrols, each step echoing a creeping threat. Both Sam and Parker knew that soon they'd have to force the issue. Greenhaven's soul teetered on the brink, and if they waited any longer, the entire town might be lost to the shadows before dawn. As the weather turned cooler, the feral wolves and their allied mercenaries escalated their actions with chilling determination. Under the thin veneer of federal oversight, Helena Briggs intensified her so-called audits, now backed by men who carried themselves like soldiers. They clamped down on local movement, stationing armed guards at critical junctures, and subjecting residents to abrupt searches of vehicles or belongings. For those who dared ask for legal warrants or official identification, the answers arrived in the form of intimidation, stern warnings, menacing stares, or the ominous cocking of a firearm. Greenhaven began to feel like an occupied town. Even the post office received inspections, with uniformed men rifling through mail under the guise of security. Sam Rogers found it harder each day to maintain the appearance of a simple farmer. He couldn't ignore neighbors who knocked on his door, pleading for advice or help, nor could he dismiss the panicked faces of local shop owners who whispered about shutting down until the trouble passed. Word reached him of a planned rally at Town Hall where Helena Briggs intended to outline a new series of public safety measures. Agent Parker believed this was more than just a meeting. It was a prelude to implementing martial law-like conditions, albeit unofficially. If successful, it would give the feral wolves and their backers unchecked power to arrest, detain, or silence anyone they deemed a threat. Gathered in Sam's farmhouse, a small circle of key figures, Parker, Sheriff Clark, Harriet Whitfield, and a couple of others who could be trusted, discussed the crisis. Harriet, her usual warmth overshadowed by fear, recounted how armed men had searched her lavender stand, scattering blossoms everywhere. "They said they were looking for contraband," she muttered, voice trembling. "Contraband in dried flowers. It's a nightmare." Parker rubbed the back of his neck, scanning a map spread out on Sam's kitchen table. "We've identified at least 4 heavily monitored checkpoints. Another 2 are rumored to be in construction. The feral wolves are effectively controlling both the main and back roads." Sheriff Clark leaned over, jaw tight. "I've tried to mobilize my deputies, but every time we move, we're told we're interfering with a federal operation, and my men are nervous. They've heard about some deputy from a neighboring county getting transferred after voicing concerns. We suspect these people have influence higher up." Harriet looked to Sam, eyes pleading. "We have to do something, Sam. The folks around here respect you. They listen to you." Sam glanced at Parker, who gave a subtle nod. "We're at a breaking point," Parker said quietly. "We can't wait for the perfect moment to pounce. The truth is, we might have to create that moment." A hush fell over the group. Everyone understood the gravity of what Parker meant. The feral wolves and their mercenaries were coiled, ready to strike at any sign of open resistance. But if Sam did nothing, Helena Briggs would proceed with her town hall announcement, legitimizing their takeover in the eyes of many uninformed residents. Finally, Sam exhaled, squaring his shoulders. "All right," he said, voice resonant with a calm resolve. "We confront them. Maybe I drive through one of their main checkpoints, make them show their hand in broad daylight. Parker, your team records the whole thing, streams it live if possible. We expose them as armed goons masquerading as officials." Harriet's gaze flickered with both fear and admiration. "But isn't that dangerous?" "Yes," Sam admitted, "but it's more dangerous to let them lock us down completely. Once they control communication, they can spin any story they want." Sheriff Clark cleared his throat. "I'll have a few good men on standby. We can't openly oppose them, but if things escalate, we'll step in." Parker tapped a note into his phone. "We'll coordinate the time and place. I'll position agents for immediate backup. But Sam, you need to be ready for retaliation. These people don't care about collateral damage." Sam's jaw tightened. "I served in places where ruthless groups tried to dominate civilians through fear and lies. I didn't let them succeed then, and I won't let them succeed now." With that statement, the plan took shape. The small group dispersed, each weighed down by the realization that a decisive confrontation was imminent. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, reflecting the collective apprehension that had seized Greenhaven. Sam stood on his porch as Harriet drove away. Her tear-streaked face turned briefly toward him in a gesture of thanks. Quietly, he returned to the makeshift command station, heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Soon the trap would be sprung, and Greenhaven's fate would hinge on who prevailed in that critical clash. On a brisk morning, Sam Rogers loaded crates of produce into the back of his old pickup truck, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of watchers. The plan had been meticulously laid out. He would drive along Route 7, where the feral wolves had set up one of their most prominent checkpoints. Agent Parker had concealed recording devices and enlisted a small cadre of allies to observe from strategic vantage points. Sheriff Clark, meanwhile, prepared to deploy a minimal but crucial police presence just out of sight. If all went according to plan, The checkpoint guards would confront Sam in a way that revealed their illegal weaponry and complete lack of legitimate authority. However, Sam understood the inherent unpredictability of such a confrontation. He slipped on a battered baseball cap, took one last look at his farm, and steeled himself. If the feral wolves overreacted, the situation could devolve into violence. If they underreacted, the entire plan might fail to produce the evidence Parker needed. Balancing on the edge of chaos, Sam drove off, the morning sun at his back. The trip through Greenhaven was surreal. He passed the old diner, where neighbors used to greet each other over pancakes and coffee, now quieter than usual. Further along, Harriet's lavender stand remained closed, a silent testament to her fear of being targeted again. Each empty storefront and anxious face reminded Sam exactly why he was doing this. At the crossroads near Route 7, Sam glimpsed Parker's unmarked SUV hidden behind a grove of trees. A fleeting sense of reassurance flickered through him. At least he wasn't going in alone. He pressed the accelerator and rounded a bend. There, across the narrow asphalt strip, stood a makeshift barricade of orange cones, two pickup trucks, and a sign reading, "Official Checkpoint, Security Screening." Half a dozen armed men milled about, some wearing the feral wolves patches, others clad in dark tactical gear. The morning sunlight glinted off their weapons. Sam eased to a stop, heart thudding. A tall man with a shaved head, a known wolf lieutenant named Mace, strode over, gesturing for Sam to roll down the window. The scowl on Mace's face spoke volumes. "Morning, big guy," he said sarcastically. "What brings you out here?" "Got a delivery to a farm further down," Sam replied evenly, nodding toward the stacked crates. "I'm just a farmer trying to do my job." "Right," Mace said, letting his gaze wander over the crates. He jerked a thumb toward one of the men in tactical gear. "Search the truck." Immediately, two men moved in. One tapped on Sam's driver's side door, indicating he should exit the vehicle. Sam took a steadying breath, mentally preparing for the next phase. He stepped out, ensuring his hands were visible. The men rifled through the crates, tossing some produce aside in their zeal. Sam forced himself to remain calm, though anger simmered at the needless destruction of his goods. "You folks got a warrant or something?" Sam asked, projecting mild confusion, as if he truly believed this checkpoint was legitimate. Mace snorted. "Don't need one. We're authorized by the Department of Agriculture and Homeland Security. Now shut up and let us do our job." A muscle in Sam's jaw twitched. This was the moment Parker's hidden cameras were capturing, the unmasked arrogance of men who had no real authority. "I'd like to see some ID," Sam pressed, keeping his tone polite but firm. Mace's eyes flashed with annoyance. "You questioning federal orders, Rogers? We know who you are. You've caused enough trouble. Might want to keep your head down unless you're looking for a world of hurt." That was the cue. Another man stepped forward, brandishing a rifle, the muzzle pointed at Sam's midsection. "Back off," the guard barked. Sam raised his hands slightly, heart hammering. This was exactly the overreach Parker needed on record. Intimidation with unregistered firearms. Yet Sam also knew they might pull the trigger if they felt threatened. Through his peripheral vision, he caught a subtle movement in the tree line. Parker's team was watching, cameras rolling, sniper on standby just in case. Mace hissed, "Pack up his junk and send him back. Or maybe we confiscate the whole truck." Sam realized they were on the brink of stepping too far. Another push might crack their facade. He decided to stand his ground. "I'm not leaving without my produce," Sam stated, voice calm despite the adrenaline spike. "This is my livelihood." What happened next took everyone by surprise. A distant voice shouted, "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" A sudden swirl of commotion followed. Half the men at the checkpoint spun, weapons raised, while others scrambled for cover. Sam hit the ground, heart pounding as the standoff erupted in a chorus of shouted commands. Spotting a camera drone overhead, Sam realized Parker was initiating the bust. Chaos ensued. In the confusion, Mace yelled for retreat. One of the tactical men aimed at the drone, firing a shot that crackled through the morning air. Another agent returned fire, striking the ground near his feet. Sam, prone behind his crate of spilled tomatoes, saw men dive behind vehicles while swirling dust enveloped the makeshift barricade. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sheriff Clark's patrol cars speeding in. Exactly as planned, the illegal arsenal was on full display, cameras capturing everything. And for the first time, the feral wolves and their mercenary allies found themselves on the defensive in broad daylight, their veneer of legitimacy shattered by the clear aggression caught on film. Through the haze of fear and tension, Sam felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the moment Greenhaven began to reclaim itself. In the aftermath of the checkpoint raid, the morning in Greenhaven became a blur of sirens, swirling dust, and raised voices. By the time the local media arrived, summoned by cryptic tips, likely orchestrated by Agent Parker, the feral wolves and their heavily armed associates had either fled or been subdued. At least 3 men lay on the ground in handcuffs, glowering at the cameras, while others had escaped into the nearby woods. Sam Rogers found himself crouched behind his truck, eyes scanning for any lingering threats. When the dust settled, Parker approached, an air of both relief and caution about him. His agents fanned out, collecting dropped firearms, logging license plates, and cordoning off the scene. "You okay?" Parker asked, hands on his hips. Sam noticed the sweat beading on Parker's brow, the tension in his voice still tight. Sam exhaled shakily. "A few bruises, maybe. They fired some shots, but I'm fine. More importantly, we got them on record, right?" Parker nodded, gesturing to the overhead drone that buzzed idly. Everything was live-streamed to a secure channel. Between that and local news footage, we have more than enough to confirm these guys aren't legitimate law enforcement. They threatened you at gunpoint, clear violation of multiple statutes. Sam looked around, heart still pounding. Sheriff Clark and a few deputies had set up a perimeter, directing traffic around the broken barricade. Reporters jockeyed for position, snapping photos of the seized weapons. A wave of relief washed over Sam, but it was tinged with unease. This was only the first domino. The ringleaders were still at large. In the confusion, Helena Briggs appeared on the scene, flanked by 2 men in suits. She attempted to approach the cluster of cameras, quickly rattling off a statement about miscommunication and rogue elements. Her voice carried an icy confidence that made Sam's blood boil. He recognized the spin, blamed the violence on a few bad apples, maintained the charade of a legitimate operation. Agent Parker, however, stepped forward with a microphone thrust by a local reporter. "Ma'am, care to explain the presence of unregistered assault rifles and unauthorized checkpoints? Under what federal agency do you operate?" Briggs gave a tight-lipped smile. "As I've stated, we're collaborating with multiple agencies to ensure public safety. These men apparently overstepped their orders. We will be conducting an internal review." The reporter pressed on, eyes flicking to Parker's FBI credentials. "But Agent Parker here has indicated your operation is not authorized by the Bureau or any recognized federal branch. How do you respond?" A flicker of annoyance marred Briggs's composed mask. "I believe there's a misunderstanding," she said, sidestepping the question. "We'll resolve it in due course." With that, she pivoted and strode away, the 2 men flanking her as if shielding her from further questioning. Sam locked eyes with Parker. She's playing the part, continuing the ruse. What if people believe her? Parker's jaw clenched. "We have direct evidence now, Sam. There's no way to spin armed men threatening a civilian at an illegal checkpoint as a miscommunication. Her backers might try to bury it, but we're pushing this up the chain. It's too public." Still, Sam worried about the segments of the population that might cling to any official-sounding excuse. Misinformation spread easily, and powerful interests knew how to manipulate the narrative. But for the moment, truth held an advantage. As authorities combed the site, Sam spotted Harriet stepping hesitantly from her car nearby. She looked over the chaotic scene, eyes brimming with tears. When she saw Sam safe, her expression relaxed, replaced with relief. She offered a grateful nod, though she still seemed overwhelmed by the sight of armed agents and confiscated weaponry strewn about. One of Parker's agents held up a confiscated crate of ammunition, jaw set. "High-grade stuff here, boss. Military issue, not available on the civilian market. This proves they have a supply chain beyond typical smuggling." Parker nodded. "Get it logged. We'll cross-reference the serial numbers with known illicit arms dealers." Meanwhile, Sam helped a deputy move Mace into a squad car. The feral wolf lieutenant snarled, "You're dead, Rogers. You hear me? You're messing with forces you can't imagine." Sam said nothing, simply closing the door. The deputy drove off, leaving Mace's furious threats behind. A part of Sam recognized the truth in Mace's words. The men at the checkpoint were the tip of a much larger iceberg. The real puppet masters, those funding and organizing this entire charade, had yet to be confronted. Nonetheless, the checkpoint raid was a victory, showing that the feral wolves weren't invincible. Their facade of authority had been cracked under the bright lens of public exposure, and now the broader world had glimpsed the truth. Armed thugs, not legitimate officials. Sam inhaled the crisp air, feeling the tension in his muscles slowly subside. But as reporters continued to circle, and as Parker's team gathered more evidence, Sam's gut told him the next move from the hidden powers behind Helena Briggs would be swift and ruthless. They wouldn't slink away quietly. In fact, they might escalate, desperate to salvage their grip on Greenhaven. Sam could only hope that with Parker's help and the courage of local citizens, they could hold the line against whatever storm came next. The footage of the checkpoint raid spread across media outlets at breakneck speed, igniting public outrage and intensifying scrutiny on Helena Briggs' operation. For days, headlines blared about rogue federal checkpoints, armed bikers in rural communities, and a small town's fight against infiltration. Under normal circumstances, such exposure would cripple any false authority. Yet Sam Rogers sensed the orchestration of a powerful behind-the-scenes machine trying to spin the narrative in its favor. As if on cue, a series of press releases flooded the airwaves, all bearing official-seeming seals, but referencing agencies that local officials had never heard of. National Security Directorate, Homeland Integrity Division, and other grandiose names. They cast the checkpoint incident as an unfortunate miscommunication, claiming that certain contractors had overstepped their bounds. This only deepened the confusion. Which agencies were real? Which were forgeries? And how far did the infiltration extend? Agent Parker, joined by a small team of experts from the FBI's Internal Affairs Division, set up a more permanent command post in town, commandeering an old community center as their operations hub. He invited Sam for a briefing, hoping to sift through the tangled web of contradictory statements. When Sam arrived, he found Parker in a flurry of phone calls, coordinating with federal prosecutors and other branches of law enforcement. Boxes of documents sat in corners, some labeled with code names, others stuffed with printed screenshots of confusing organizational charts. "Glad you could make it," Parker said, motioning for Sam to follow him into a side room. There, a large corkboard displayed pictures, news clippings, and connecting lines of red yarn. In the center was a photograph of Helena Briggs, flanked by unidentified figures. "We're identifying her backers. She's just a pawn, albeit a high-placed one." Sam studied the board, noticing certain figures repeated across multiple images. "Who's this?" he asked, pointing to a tall, gray-haired man in a crisp suit. Parker's lips thinned. "We believe that's Colonel Edward Vance, a retired military officer turned private security magnate. He's got government connections that run deep, including defense contracts. Word is he's been building a privatized force, selling its capabilities under the table." Sam took a breath, realizing they'd moved from a local problem to national-level corruption. So the feral wolves are just one piece of Vance's puzzle. They provide local intimidation, handle illicit deliveries, and act as the visible muscle. Parker nodded. And with Briggs providing a veneer of bureaucratic legitimacy, they can operate almost in plain sight. The fiasco at the checkpoint may have set them back, but it also ups the ante. Vance won't let a small setback derail years of planning. Before Sam could respond, a knock sounded, and one of Parker's agents, Webb, entered with a laptop. "We've got something you need to see," he said, voice urgent. He set the laptop on a table, revealing live drone footage of a remote warehouse near the county line. Outside, convoys of dark vans unloaded large crates. Dozens of men in tactical gear swarmed about, establishing perimeter defenses. Sam's gut clenched. "That's a small army," Parker said, leaning over Webb's shoulder. "And they're not even hiding it. Could be a major weapons transfer, or they're consolidating forces for a bigger move." Sam exhaled slowly. They might try to lock down Greenhaven entirely, or even attempt a show of force somewhere else to distract from the embarrassment at the checkpoint. Parker's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, face darkening. Confirmed multiple high-level arrivals at that warehouse. Helicopter landed an hour ago. Vance could be there in person. If that's the case, they're planning something significant. A tense silence settled among them. Sam recalled his conversation with Harriet earlier that day. She'd mentioned strangers in suits asking about water supplies and land access, as though preparing for a siege. Now it all clicked. If the Colonel and Helena Briggs decided to reassert control, they could stage a catastrophic demonstration of their power. Parker grabbed a set of keys and motioned for Sam to follow. We need eyes on that warehouse, but we also need to coordinate with higher authorities, maybe the National Guard. If we take them on ourselves, we risk a bloodbath. Sam followed Parker outside, where a cluster of agents loaded gear into unmarked SUVs. The air crackled with tension, the men's postures stiff, their conversations clipped. Harriet would have described this scene as the calm before the storm, and Sam couldn't disagree. As they prepared to roll out, Parker paused, looking Sam square in the eyes. Listen, Rogers, you've helped us a lot, but this could get ugly fast. If Vance is on site with his mercenaries, you'll be stepping into a war zone. Sam's expression hardened. I'm in. Greenhaven's my home. If I back out now, they'll steamroll this town. Besides, I've lived through war zones before. What's one more battle for the right cause? Parker gave a grim nod. The agents revved the engines, and the convoy pulled away from the old community center. In the rearview mirror, Sam watched the building fade. He wondered if the next time he saw it, the conflict would be over, or if it would stand as one more casualty in a brewing confrontation that threatened to erupt into full-scale violence. Sunset painted the sky in ominous oranges and reds as Agent Parker's convoy halted a mile shy of the remote warehouse. Sam Rogers stepped out, scanning the area with binoculars. From their vantage point on a wooded ridge, they could see men patrolling the perimeter below, armed with rifles and patrolling in pairs. The warehouse itself was well lit, with floodlights reflecting off the line of sleek black SUVs. Now and then, the rotor blades of a helicopter atop a makeshift landing pad cut through the dusk, a constant reminder of the resources Colonel Edward Vance commanded. A small cluster of federal agents set up portable surveillance equipment. Others crouched among the pines, waiting for night to deepen. Sam joined Parker behind a camouflaged truck, reviewing a hastily assembled plan. If they stormed the warehouse outright, they risked a firefight that could spill over into nearby communities. But letting Vance's operation continue meant conceding ground to a private army. Tension lay thick in the air. Webb, the tech-savvy agent, approached with a laptop, showing real-time drone feeds. We've confirmed at least 50 operators, fully armed. Some vehicles have license plates traceable to private security firms. Others are unregistered. Movement suggests they're preparing for a large-scale deployment, maybe not just in Greenhaven. Parker narrowed his eyes. They might be finalizing a massive weapons shipment, or they could be staging a takeover demonstration. If Vance wants to showcase how his privatized force can seize a region, we've handed him the perfect test bed by pushing him to the brink. Sam felt a surge of anger. We can't let them lock down Greenhaven. These people aren't just smugglers. They're orchestrating a blueprint for subverting democracy, one small town at a time. Parker nodded in agreement. We need a multi-agency sweep. I've called in everything I can, but it might be hours before specialized backup arrives if they don't get blocked by bureaucratic or political meddling. We do have a green light to intervene if we find undeniable evidence of an immediate threat. They didn't have to wait long. Over the next hour, multiple trucks arrived at the warehouse, each escorted by armed guards. Crates were transferred with military efficiency, the men systematically scanning the horizon. Sam recognized practiced discipline. These weren't weekend warriors. They had training that hinted at backgrounds in special ops or private contractor work overseas. As darkness deepened, Harriet Whitfield's words echoed in Sam's mind. We're counting on you. He inhaled, remembering all the neighbors who had quietly resisted intimidation, who shared produce and home-cooked meals in defiance of fear. This was the line in the sand. Just then, headlights cut through the gloom behind them. Another unmarked SUV approached. Out stepped a figure Sam had never seen before, a high-ranking official from the Bureau, judging by the crisp suit and the stern expression. Parker greeted him with a salute, then introduced him to Sam. Deputy Director Caldwell, the man said brusquely, eyeing the scene below. I've authorized limited use of force if you can show probable cause that these individuals intend violent action. We have one shot to do this cleanly and legally. Parker gestured at the feed on Webb's laptop. Sir, they're heavily armed, well-coordinated, and loading crates that are likely full of illegal arms. We suspect an imminent move. Caldwell's lips tightened. Very well. Pull your team together. We'll do a pincer maneuver. One approach from the main gate, another from the back. We can't let them slip away. Sam checked his handgun, plus a rifle Parker had provided him. He'd never thought he'd operate in tandem with a federal team again, but here he was, older and heavier, yet still driven by the same core principle: protect those who can't protect themselves. Within minutes, a surge of activity rattled the small camp. Agents donned tactical vests, tested communications, and mapped out final infiltration points. Sam joined a squad bound for the rear entrance. Ready? Parker asked him quietly. As ready as I can be, Sam replied, tightening a strap on his vest. He felt the tension mount, that old mixture of fear and adrenaline, the prelude to potential chaos. Then Caldwell gave the order, move out. In hushed precision, the squads advanced. Sam's heart thudded as they left the safety of the wooded ridge, crossing open ground. The warehouse loomed larger with each step, floodlights illuminating the tarmac. He prayed that the darkness and the element of surprise would be enough. They reached the perimeter fence, cutting through it silently. Sam's breath caught in his throat when he spotted a guard ahead. One agent neutralized him with a swift, silent takedown. Further in, the muffled sound of vehicles and men barking orders drifted through the night air. Then everything happened in a flash. The main gate squad stormed forward. A chorus of shouted commands and gunfire broke the silence. Lights flicked on, revealing Colonel Vance himself standing near a cluster of crates, flanked by bodyguards. His face twisted into fury, and Sam could almost read his lips. Eliminate them! Gunfire erupted, tracer rounds slicing across the compound. Sam ducked behind a crate as bullets spattered metal. He glimpsed Parker returning fire alongside Webb, each shot measured. Another agent lobbed a flashbang, forcing a squad of mercenaries to scatter. Amid the chaos, Sam locked eyes with Vance. For a fraction of a second, the older man's expression revealed shock, perhaps recognition that the big farmer was part of the assault. Sam raised his weapon, adrenaline surging. The final battle for Greenhaven's future was underway, and Sam vowed he would see it through, no matter the cost. Sparks danced off metal crates as bullets ricocheted across the warehouse yard. Sirens wailed from a distance, heralding more law enforcement converging on the chaotic scene. Sam Rogers huddled behind an upturned forklift, scanning for Colonel Vance amid the crisscross of muzzle flashes. Everywhere he looked, men in dark tactical gear clashed with federal agents. The night sky punctuated by the staccato pop of gunfire. Agent Parker's voice crackled in Sam's earpiece. We've pinned them down in the west corner, near a loading dock. Keep pressing forward. Sam nodded reflexively, though Parker couldn't see him. He sprinted to a stack of crates, bullets zipping overhead. Behind him, Webb provided covering fire. From the eastern side, Deputy Director Caldwell's squad advanced methodically, taking advantage of the element of surprise. Even so, Vance's private army fought back with unnerving skill. Sam's heart pounded as he glimpsed the scope of the operation. Scattered around were large wooden crates labeled with fictitious addresses and misapplied shipping labels. He recognized these as cover for a global arms pipeline, precisely the kind of high-stakes smuggling ring he once combated overseas. Suddenly, a flash of movement drew his attention. Colonel Vance, slipping behind a warehouse door with two bodyguards. Sam clenched his teeth, determined not to let the man escape. He dashed across open ground, praying no sniper had him in their sights. Reaching the door, Sam found it partially ajar. Inside, flickering emergency lights cast shadows over a maze of crates and conveyor belts. His earpiece buzzed again. Parker's voice. Sam, do you see Vance? We've lost visual. Sam whispered, He's inside, I'm going in. Be careful, came Parker's reply. We'll circle around to back you up. Shouldering his rifle, Sam eased into the dimly lit interior. The air smelled of oil and gunpowder. Broken crates littered the floor, revealing an array of weapons. Assault rifles, submachine guns, even a few rocket launchers. It was worse than he'd imagined. This was no small-time smuggling operation. It was a potential armory for militias worldwide. Stepping deeper, he caught sight of footprints leading behind a tall row of crates. He slowed, senses on high alert. A faint scuff of boots to his right made him whirl just in time to see one of Vance's bodyguards leveling a pistol. Sam fired instinctively, the crack of the rifle echoing in the enclosed space. The guard dropped, weapon clattering away. Heart racing, Sam pressed on. Another shot rang out, whizzing past his shoulder. He dove behind a metal drum, returning fire. Through the gloom, he spotted Colonel Vance's silhouette, the older man's posture rigid with cold fury. Vance shouted, "You're a fool, Rogers. You can't stop progress. People want security, and I'm delivering it." Sam barked back, "You're selling fear and tyranny. Not here, not in Greenhaven." A pause, then Vance sneered, "You have no idea who you're crossing. I can rebuild anywhere. This is just one outpost." Sam set his jaw, shifting position. "Maybe, but you're not leaving this one." A flash of movement signaled Vance raising a sidearm. Sam darted around the crates, firing in controlled bursts. One bullet grazed Vance's shoulder, spinning him against a stack of boxes. The colonel let out a pained snarl, dropping his pistol. Sam advanced cautiously, rifle trained on the wounded man. "I've seen men like you before," Sam said, voice taut with adrenaline. "Dressed up oppression as a service, sold terror as security. Not in my town." Before Vance could reply, footsteps thundered behind Sam. He whirled to see Parker and two agents arriving, weapons drawn. Vance's eyes flicked between them, calculating. Parker's voice was steady. "Colonel Edward Vance, you're under arrest for conspiracy, illegal arms trafficking, and a dozen other charges. Don't move." Defeated, Vance slid to his knees, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Outside, the gunfire waned as the mercenaries realized their leader was cornered. Agents flooded the warehouse, securing the last pockets of resistance. Sam lowered his rifle, a mixture of relief and exhaustion crashing over him. The clatter of boots, the crackle of radios, and the distant wail of more sirens formed a dissonant symphony. The fight was over, at least here. But he understood that this takedown would reverberate far beyond Greenhaven. Files would be seized, associates named, and hidden partners exposed. Countless communities might be spared the fate the feral wolves had tried to impose. As paramedics bustled in, Parker placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. "You did it," he murmured. "We all did." Sam gazed around at the massive cache of weapons, the battered colonel, and the lines of detained mercenaries. Harriet Whitfield's kindly smile and the tranquil fields of Greenhaven seemed so distant from this tableau of violence. Yet that was precisely the life Sam had fought to protect. He nodded to Parker, swallowing hard. Time to rebuild and make sure something like this never happens again. Outside, dawn light crept over the horizon, illuminating a warehouse once meant to fuel chaos. Today, it stood as a testament to those willing to risk everything for their hometown's peace. Sam Rogers felt the old soldier in him finally rest, if only for a moment, in the satisfaction of a hard-won victory. Looking back on everything that happened in Greenhaven, it's clear that courage and unity can triumph over even the darkest threats. Sam's unwavering resolve showed that when a community stands together, neighbors, law enforcement, and unexpected allies, a once fearful place can transform into a haven of hope. Though the scars remain, from bullet holes to shaken nerves, they also serve as reminders of what people can achieve when they refuse to bow to intimidation. Now that the criminals have been exposed and justice is on the horizon, the town can begin to heal. New friendships have been forged, old ones strengthened, and a sense of purpose rekindled. What's your take on these events? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your opinions, questions, or reflections on Greenhaven's harrowing struggle. Thank you for joining us, and remember to stay subscribed for more stories that prove real heroes often come in the most unexpected forms.